So the Sacramento Kings met expectations this season. I mean, on the surface, that is a good or positive thing to say or do, but it's kind of sad because their expectations were that they would be right in front of the teams that were obviously tanking, like the Rockets and the Thunder, but behind teams like the Clippers, who are going to be play-in tournament hopefuls. Even though the Kings are in like the realm of mediocrity, irrelevancy, and flat-out NBA purgatory, a lot of notable things did happen during their season. So Luke Walton was fired within, I think, the first 10 games. He was obviously fired 3 seasons too late. I don't think he ever should have been hired in the first place, and Dave Yeager should have still been coaching this team a long time ago, but that's for neither here nor there. They're finally rid of Luke. He's never really been a good head coach, so I don't know what they really saw in him 3 years ago when they picked him up. There was a lot of turbulence in the locker room based off his rotations, who he played, who he gave confidence to. Don't really know how many players actually liked playing for the guy, but he's finally gone. Now, the Sabonis-Halliburton trade. I love Tyrese Halliburton. Pause, no homo. He was one of my favorite young players to watch, and I feel like the Kings had a great pickup in terms of drafting him where they did, even though, you know, he was a point guard coming into the league, the De'Aaron Fox thing, how are they going to play together, why would they draft him in the first place? I feel like that could have been a duo that definitely worked, and at the very, very least, if the duo didn't work, I think Halliburton was showing signs that he should have been the player that the Kings built around and not De'Aaron Fox, and that they should have traded De'Aaron Fox, maybe roll Halliburton and Davion Mitchell as the backcourt of the future, but can't talk about that anymore because they made their decision. So yeah, I think the Halliburton trade was an L, because I think they should have kept him and built around him, but they have Sabonis now. With that being said, the Sabonis and De'Aaron partnership has worked. If you look at the stats of De'Aaron Fox when he played in games with Sabonis, those were the best numbers of the season for him. And though they both don't shoot very much or very well from outside the three-point line, that's like what immediately jumps out to you when you look at the negatives of this pairing. They can work together because they're both savvy and very smart in terms of playmaking, especially Sabonis. So that pick and roll action, combining the savviness and craftiness of Sabonis with the athleticism and speed of De'Aaron Fox, that's a great partnership. And the Sabonis pickup really just adds more high-end talent in the front court, and that's kind of what the Kings were going to need if they were going to trade away one of their high-level point guards. So while I do think the Pacers in the long term are going to win this trade, if they're going to build around Fox, getting a player like Sabonis was the right guy to target. I just hope that they can make it work going forward. Now, for the DiVincenzo pickup, I'm not really going to get into the actual parts that were moved to get DiVincenzo because it's pretty complex. They've been wanting to get DiVincenzo for the past, I think, 2 years, and they finally saw a chance to get him while he was kind of struggling coming back from the injury in Milwaukee. I guess his value was a bit lower than it was 2 years ago, but DiVincenzo is a good guy for the Kings to pick up. High-level defender on the perimeter. His three-point shot is a lot more consistent from what it was when he came into the league, and he's definitely a good player to play next to either Davion Mitchell or De'Aaron Fox at that two-guard position. Now, generally, what went wrong for this team, the defensive personnel just really isn't there. Sure, Richaun Holmes plays hard, but he's not the best defensive center, and he didn't really play that much this year, but we'll talk about that later. Harrison Barnes has always been either a mid or below average defender. Halliburton was a good defender in his time there. They have Davion Mitchell, but there's only so much that a 6'2" point guard can do to carry a defense. Marvin Bagley in his time there had defensive issues. Trey Lyles is not a great defender, but he healed. Never really been a great defender, and he was having a down year in Sacramento, as is on the offensive end. So yeah, there's just not a lot of defensive personnel that the Kings had to work with last season. And then bringing in Domantas Sabonis, who is a heralded average or below average defender at either the center or the power forward position. There has to be some major attention to the defensive personnel in the offseason. And then on the offensive end, not a great shooting team. You have centers like Damian Jones and Rashawn Holmes who aren't going to be spacing the floor. Fox had a bad year from three again. Marvin Bagley in his time there didn't develop the three ball. Davion Mitchell coming out of college, we knew he was going to struggle from three-point land. It was going to have to be an area of concern and improvement for him going forward if he wanted to fulfill his potential. There's just not a lot of spacing for De'Aaron Fox to really go crazy. And it also didn't help that Buddy Hield wasn't as prolific this year for the Kings before he was traded. They had Harrison Barnes, who's always been a cool, tertiary shot creator, but mainly a spot-up guy. So he was cool. He was really the only main consistent three-point shooter, him and Tyrese Halliburton when he was there. But outside of that, it was pretty mid for Sacramento from outside. So talking about specific players, starting with the top performers, De'Aaron Fox, he's obviously this team's lead scorer and playmaker. He's been that player ever since he was drafted by the Kings. But the thing is with him, his defensive effort is really inconsistent, especially this year. And his three-point shot got a bit worse. I think he had that one good year from three-point land in his second year, but ever since then, it's just been mid or just below average. So he's still this team's franchise player, I believe. That was why they traded Tyrese Halliburton, clear up the backcourt for De'Aaron Fox a bit. And after that trade, he was kind of playing all-star caliber. When Sabonis arrived, he was dropping 28 and 6 on good efficiency from the field. But with Davion Mitchell having a great rookie year, I don't know how well the two could coexist in the same backcourt because they both love to get to the rim, and their outside shooting really consists of mid-range pull-ups, both of them. So I don't really know how well that partnership would work in the same starting backcourt if neither of them improves from the three-point line. Next is Domantas Sabonis. He played 15 games for the Kings after the trade. We know Sabonis' game, low post creator, whether he's creating offense for himself or offense for others. He was a great pick and roll man for De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell. He's an elite rebounder, but the questions for him come on the defensive end. He's not a high-level shot blocker or just rim protector in general. So that hurts him when he's playing the 5 and hurts the team when he is this team's defensive anchor. And he doesn't have really the foot speed to really defend in space, and that really hurts his ability to play the 4 position. I think he can 100% be the second best option on a playoff team. He's obviously been the number 1 option on a playoff team in the past in Indiana. And I like his fit with Fox on the offensive end, despite the outside shooting concerns. To make the Sabonis trade really work, the Kings are going to have to find the ideal partner next to Sabonis at the 4 position, focusing on the defensive end. The last top performer to talk about is Harrison Barnes. Tertiary shot creator, marksman from downtown, shaky defender. On his best days, he's somebody that can guard 2 through 4 because of his size. But on his worst days, he's kind of a liability on the perimeter because of his lack of elite foot speed. He was one of Sacramento's dependable shooters last year. He's got 1 year left on his contract, making $18 million. So that's going to be interesting to see how the Kings manage that. And his defensive fit, not only with Sabonis, but with De'Aaron Fox, whose effort on the defensive end is inconsistent. That's kind of where questions are drawn because you got 3 guys who are average or below average defenders in the same starting 5, which is not ideal. There's one main prospect to talk about, and that's Davion Mitchell. His strengths are on the defensive end and his energy, his playmaking, and his mid-range and in scoring. Coming out of Baylor, he was one of the best, if not the best, perimeter defenders in the 2021 class. And he lived up to those expectations, if not exceeding them. He got the nickname Off Night because point guards who went up against him struggled. They shot in the 30% range from the field. Guys like Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, Donovan Mitchell. So he's a high-level perimeter defender. He's great at getting over screens and staying on his guy. Not only is he just a high-level, high IQ defender, but his effort level on the defensive end is what makes him more impactful. In terms of playmaking, he was really solid. Pick and roll especially, working with guys like Damian Jones, Rashawn Holmes, and Domantas Sabonis when he came over. And then out of the pick and roll, he was able to showcase the extent of his outside scoring, which was just mid-range pull-ups from the elbow, and when he was able to get all the way to the rim and score. He's obviously going to have to work at his three-point shooting, shooting 33% on catch and shoots and 28% off the dribble. That's going to be the main part of his game that's going to unleash his ceiling if he can work at it and improve at it. And it's also going to be opportunity, because if he's just going to be the backup point guard behind De'Aaron Fox, then he's not really going to reach his full potential during his tenure in Sacramento. Two more guys to talk about, DiVincenzo and Richaun Holmes. Now, DiVincenzo, talked about him in the trade. He's a 3-and-D 2 guard, can also play a bit of point guard because of his playmaking ability and slashing ability. He's pretty quick. He would be a plus in the starting five next to Fox, and he would also be great in the bench next to Davion Mitchell if whoever is the coach wants to keep Fox and Davion like off the court, not playing with each other in the same lineup as much as possible. As for Richaun Holmes, he's a high-level paint scorer as a dunker, spot, or a roll guy. He really mastered like these little like flip and floater shots from 5 to 6 to 7 feet out from the rim. It's like really unorthodox, but he's kind of coined it as his thing. The unfortunate thing for Holmes was that he was demoted to a bench role after the Sabonis trade. It was not going to be in the best interest to play the two together. And then he was out of the lineup just with injuries, legal battles off the court, and also Damian Jones, who's much less maintenance and a lot more affordable than Richaun Holmes. He turned into the dependable backup five. He was serviceable, played hard, rolled hard, everything you really need out of a backup five. So Damian Jones was just a bit more dependable. And it's unfortunate because Holmes just signed a 3-year contract after his high-level play last season. I don't think he's going to be as essential for this team going forward for a lot of reasons that he really just can't control. Now we look to the offseason for the Kings. In the draft, they have potential to land in the top 4 if they get lucky, but they're likely to land in the 7 to 9 range. Obviously, if they get lucky, guys like Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren would be in their best interest. But in their range, the best prospects for them to target are Keegan Murray, Johnny Davis, and Benedict Mathurin. I really like Keegan Murray for the Kings if they're able to get him, because maybe not out of the gates, but eventually he can develop into a high-level, just Swiss Army knife type of guy on the defensive end because of his defensive versatility. And that is a really good fit next to Sabonis at the 5. If they choose to run Sabonis at the 5 and just want a versatile, switchy defender at the 4, Keegan Murray could definitely turn into that. And he's also a high-level shooter from the 4 position, shot around 40% from 3. Johnny Davis is another good target. I'm kind of skeptical that he falls to like number 7. He'll probably get drafted at 5 or 6, but if he fell to 7, he'd be another good guy for the Kings to target. He's got high upside as a shot creator. He's one of the best one-on-one scorers in this draft, especially from the 2-guard position. Not only does he have an all-around shot-creating game on the offensive end, but he's a really intense perimeter defender. The Kings could use a go-to scorer off the bench, especially if Davion Mitchell is moved to the starting position. And the Kings are definitely in need of more defensive personnel. Johnny Davis could solve both of those problems for Sacramento, especially off the bench as a go-to guy. And then there's Benedict Mathurin, who I've talked about a lot. Great 3-and-D prospect, one of the best shooters in the class, good size to play either wing position, and good size to defend all 3 perimeter positions. Benedict is really a solid guy for any team to target outside of the top 5. As for free agency, DiVincenzo and Damian Jones are the 2 significant free agents for Sacramento. DiVincenzo is going to be a restricted free agent, so the Kings should really easily bring him back as they can match any contract he's offered. He should get between 8 to 10 or maybe 8 to 12 million per year. As for Damian Jones, he's not a restricted free agent, but he's not somebody who's going to command more than $4.5 million per year. He played really good minutes for the Kings, especially when he became the full-time backup 5, so it would be in their best interest to bring him back. The cap space situation is about $13 million for the Kings. Obviously, a lot of that's going to be eaten up by bringing back DiVincenzo. But looking at player need, they need a 3-and-D 2-guard, a rim-protecting, rim-running 5-man, a versatile defensive forward, and a bench sniper. Now, obviously, DiVincenzo, he can fit the need for 3-and-D 2-guard, simply bringing him back. But if they want to go outside a house, they can get Gary Payton II, one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire league. 3-ball was a bit iffy earlier in his career, but this season he's been a bit more consistent at 36%. and he's playing winning ball in Golden State. Maybe the Kings could poach him. As for that rim protecting 5, obviously Damian Jones, bringing him back. He had his best season as a pro this year, very active screener and roller, really mobile for being 6'11", and he's quite a good rim protector. But if the Kings wanted a higher upside option, then they could try and get Jalen Smith, who's going to be available and won't be a restricted free agent because of the weird rules that aren't allowing the Pacers to go over the cap to bring him back. Not only is he a rim protector, not only is he a dunker spot, pick and roll guy, but he's also a high level shooter from the 5 position. As for versatile defensive forwards, Juan Toscano-Anderson could be a good target. He's the typical glue guy, competes extremely hard on the defensive end, can guard 4 positions. He's a much improved passer from the 4 from playing in Golden State's system. He's a streaky shooter, but he's still a threat. Stanley Johnson is another guy. He played solid minutes for the Lakers this season. Good versatile defender, a much more streaky shooter than Toscano. Toscano's more consistent than Stanley, but the Kings are going to have a lot of money in free agency, so Stanley could be the guy for them to target if they don't want to spend that much money. As for getting a bench sniper, Bryn Forbes maybe. He's just a really great shooter. He flies off of screens. He's a good catch and shoot guy as well. Thinking around $5 million could be the price tag for him. Now for the off-season trade market. On the block could be Richaun Holmes and Harrison Barnes. As for Richaun, he just had a disappointing year after getting his long-term contract. Now with Sabonis running the 5, Damian Jones is really serviceable as a backup 5 for much less money. Richaun probably holds more value for the Kings as an asset in the market for what he could bring back in a trade. And for Harrison Barnes, he's on an expiring contract. He kind of hurt Sacramento on the defensive end. He and Sabonis in the same front court is not really ideal, so for that reason he might be on the block. I have 2 main predictions for the Kings. I think they're going to re-sign DiVincenzo and Damian Jones. The Kings wanted to trade for Dante way back in 2020 and they finally got him, so I don't think they'll just let him walk, plus he's a restricted free agent. And given how productive Damian was as a backup 5, he shouldn't cost them too much in free agency. He just had his best year as a pro, so it doesn't really make sense for the Kings to let him walk. I also predict the Kings to draft Benedict Mathurin. Their pick should land around number 7, and Mathurin should definitely be available there. I think he would thrive as a bench wing, especially playing off the ball, off the playmaking of Sabonis, Fox, and Mitchell. Coming into the season, the Kings were viewed as fringe candidates for the play-in tournament. Obviously, they fell a bit short of that estimation. Something we didn't expect was that Tyrese Halliburton would not end the season in a Kings uniform. I personally think this was a poor trade on Sacramento's behalf, but they opted to make more of a win-now decision by adding Sabonis, who's a star, more on the timeline of their franchise player, De'Aaron Fox. This was another underwhelming and somewhat uninspiring year for the Kings, but there was quite a bright sign, and his name is Davion Mitchell. He surpassed the already high expectations he had as a lockdown defender coming out of Baylor, and on the offensive end, he displayed natural feel as a mid-range and in-scorer, and as a quality playmaker in the half court. He especially shined in starting minutes when Fox was sidelined, and with more time after the Halliburton trade. If he continues to develop his outside scoring ability, particularly from the three-point line, this could go down as one of Sacramento's best draft picks in recent memory. I think with a full season of the Sabonis-Fox pairing and Mitchell maybe taking the next step in his progression in year 2, the Kings will improve on the offensive end, though they have serious questions to address on defense. In free agency, a top focus should be filling the need for a 3-and-D guard, which they can address by re-signing DiVincenzo. They could stand to add some defense in the starting front court next to Sabonis. I think re-signing Damian Jones is the right decision, though it remains to be seen if he's a starting caliber 5. Jalen Smith will be an unrestricted free agent this offseason. He's a 22-year-old who showed great signs as a rim-protecting stretch 5 in Indy. If Sacramento wants to spend some money for a high-end option at the 5, who's still got some unreached potential, Jalen is the answer. The Kings can add some defensive depth via the draft as well. At their position, floor-spacing versatile forward Keegan Murray and 3-and-D wing Benedict Mathurin are the best options. At the end of the day, Sacramento's success will come down to De'Aaron Fox. Monty McNair trading away young star Halliburton to fortify the front court with Sabonis sent the message that Fox is still viewed as the franchise player. Entering his 6th year, the Kings will need him to take his game to the next level next season as a definitive all-star caliber player.
Last year I missed a couple meals.